Welcome back to Every Horror Film, where horror is forever. We are on to Halloween 2 in our Halloween franchise review series. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'm with Jeff, as always. Jeff, what's going on, man? How you doing?
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking around for round two. We got about 11 more rounds to get through, so I appreciate you making it this far.
We've got a lot to get through. So we did our review on Halloween 1. You guys can check that on the channel if you haven't seen it. Now on to Halloween 2, 1981. Watched this film with my Halloween box set here on Blu-ray that I have. This is great. This has lasted me for so many years. I'm thinking about upgrading to 4K because when I watch 4K, the original Halloween, and I watched this in Blu-ray, I definitely could tell a difference. And I was like, okay, I need to buy
You
the
could tell
4K.
the difference for sure. And people would say, oh, it's from the 70s. It's shot on film. You can't even see a difference. If you know movies well enough, you could see a difference for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely could tell a difference. So I definitely want to get my hands on the 4K version whenever I can. So let's talk Halloween 2. For me, I'll give my opinion on what I've always thought of this film before we get into it. Every time we do a review on these films, we watch it to get a fresh perspective, just to make sure we know what's going on. So I watched Halloween 2 the other night. To me, this has always been one of my favorite sequels in the Halloween series. I like the idea of being in the hospital, it being completely dark. I like the idea of, I know this is a different actor that plays Michael instead of Nick Castle. It's Dick Warlock. A lot of people don't like the way he moves in this film. I personally do. A lot of people don't like the mask, even though it's the same mask. We all know that, but I just like the way he looks. I like the way he flows in the film. I like some of the characters that are in the hospital. And this has always been my main thought. This has always been my second favorite film in the franchise. However, upon watching it this time around, I don't know if it was the mood that I was in, or if it was just I'm not sure what it was, but this was my least favorite viewing of this film I've ever had. I was
Wow.
really, really bored watching this film, honestly. And I don't know if it's just because I've seen a lot of more modern films lately that have more stuff going on. But to me, I've always watched the Halloween franchise, and just I've always loved it just because I love the franchise. But I'll get into reasons later, Jeff. I'll let you touch on your main thoughts on the film. But to me, I was kind of bored watching this movie for the first time ever.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I know you grew up with it and you say it's your second favorite, but how many times have you watched it prior to this? I mean, obviously not as many times as the original, but how many times do you think you watched it? Like at least 10?
I would probably say, yeah, 10 or close to 10, maybe more than 10 or close.
Okay. My count is probably this was probably number five. This is probably my fifth time viewing it. And I think you hit the nail on the head here. It's just it's boring. And there's no other way to put it. It has completely lost all the magic of the original, even though it's a direct follow-up to the original. And there's a lot of production reasons why that is. But I was of the same opinion, and I always kind of was, but even this time I was just like, man, this is boring. I don't need to watch this. Like I was bored for
Yeah,
sure.
there are a lot of scenes in this film that, watching it upon this go around, that just really drag out with nothing happening. And I'm okay with that, if it's a slow burn type of film. But I've always, excuse me, I've always liked the idea of Halloween 2 happening directly after Halloween 1. I think that's a,
Mhm.
a good plot point. And it immediately happens right after Michael falls off the balcony. But you know, there are just a lot of scenes in this film in the hospital. Upon we get the explained mythos of Michael being related to Laurie, which some people like, some people don't. For me, I mean, I'm okay with it. It's not the best thing, but I don't mind it.
Mhm.
But there's just not a lot that happens in this film until now. I will say the last 20 minutes, the ending, where Michael finally, Loomis and all them get to the hospital with Dr. With the deputy and the nurse, and then Laurie's kind of like screaming help me, and she walks in, they let her in, and then Michael bursts through the door. That lasts like 20 minutes where and they blow up essentially at the very end. I think that's a very good buildup, and I do like that scene. But upon reviewing this film, there were a lot of moments where I just was just kind of bored. It just wasn't a lot going on.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head. I was gonna say the same exact thing. Like the only time I had my eyes glued to the screen this time around was in that final climax between Loomis and Michael and Laurie in the hospital room. That's the only time I had my eyes glued to the screen. Otherwise, I was just like, come on, like what's happening? But
Yeah,
um, it- obviously, I don't think we need to dive into the story as much because the interesting thing about Halloween 2 is the behind the scenes, why it is what it is, why
sure.
we feel the way we do, how it came about, and why it went away. I mean, how much do you know about where John Carpenter's head was at when he was making this?
His head was in a 6 pack of beer
Yep.
because he
Yeah.
did not want to do this film. And,
Mhm.
I could see his point. Essentially, everyone knows the backstory, but if you don't, we'll go over it real quick. Basically, John Carpenter didn't want to do this film. He thought there was zero left for the story to be told. He wanted to do an anthology series with Halloween, which happens with Halloween 3. But legally, he was binded to this film. He was being sued by the producer of the film, and he was like, "Hey, you've got to make Halloween 2." So he didn't direct the film. It's directed by Rick Rosenthal instead. But John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, they did, write the film and kind of help redirect some scenes, and so they were pretty involved with the film. So he really didn't know where to take the movie. So that's where he came up with the sister angle, which we see here about halfway through the film, and we find out that Michael and Laurie are related. Personally, I don't mind that. I think that's okay. I think a lot of people really hate on that idea. I don't mind it. They like when Michael has no motive, which I agree is scary, but at the same time, yeah, I'm okay with it. It doesn't ruin the film for me.
Mhm. Yeah, and you hit it perfectly. I mean, John Carpenter, he didn't want to do it, and the whole script and the whole screenplay just reeks of him phoning it in and just trying to slog through it. I mean, he definitely didn't put forth the effort, and you can't really blame him because he didn't expect the first one to take off like it did. He didn't expect to create this timeless icon. It wasn't what he was trying to do. That's why he never introduced the family connection. That's why he never planned for a follow up. He didn't want to do it, and I think in 1984, 85, he did an interview where he was like, this movie sucks. It's such a disappointment. He hated the movie. I think he said those words exactly. So it's it's tough because it's like, what do you do when you create something that just completely blows up and you're just like, I was never supposed to follow this up. Like, how am I supposed to follow this up? I don't want to. I'm trying to make the thing, I'm trying to do other things. And even more, what makes it even more challenging is between 78 and 81 when this came out. um, the original Halloween spawned so many slasher knockoffs. I mean, it kick-started the slasher genre, and immediately with the box office success that Halloween 1 was, I mean, I think the budget was like 300 grand or something ridiculous like that, and it made
Yeah.
like 70 million or some crazy ratio like that. The slasher genre completely took off, and it became that 80s and 90s horror genre that we know and love now, and that's because of Halloween. So since Halloween came out, the market was flooded with this. So not only do you have a guy who doesn't want to follow up a one-off project, you also have a guy who doesn't want to follow up a one-off project and one up all the knockoffs that are out there. So it's a really, there's no winning for John Carpenter, and by even attempting it, there was no winning for the fans.
Correct. And, I'll give credit to Rick Rosenthal because his actual direction for the film, and there is a TV, I believe there is a TV cut version for this film where there are a couple of different things going on. I haven't seen that, but his actual approach that he wanted was to be like the original. He wanted to keep that mythos. He wanted to keep that same kind of mystique, the camera movements, the cinematography, which they have the same
Mhm.
cinematographer in this film. But John Carpenter, like you mentioned, he didn't want to do the film, but after Halloween 78, it spawned so many copycats, and the gore was just, getting up there. So he thought, the only way people are going to keep up with this film is if there's more gore, because if they see another, suspense thriller low on blood, they're not going to be used to that like they were in 78. They're used
Right.
to Friday the 13th and all the copycats, all the blood, all the the gore. So
Texas Chainsaw.
correct. So he was he wanted to kind of up the ante there in a way, which I think is fine, but it certainly takes away the subtlety of the first film. And I think that ended up hurting it at the end of the day. But with all that, aside, I know I've already said this a couple of times, but there's just so much filler in this film that is just boring. I like I said, I'll start with some of the things I like. I don't know how you feel, but I do like Michael in this film. Do you like the way he's portrayed in this film?
It's tough because I like the way Dick Warlock acted. I don't like the way the writing took him. That's the problem, you know. I don't like that in the first kill. I like the gory kills. Obviously, let me get that out of the way. I think the gory kills in this movie and beyond really show Michael Myers as a threat, which maybe we didn't get in the original. I love the gory kills. Great job, very creative. But in the opening kill, when you show me Michael's eyeballs and
Yeah.
it's not flowing blood from the coat hanger that just happened 2 hours ago, you got some issues there, you know. I don't want to see his eyeballs at all. I want black shadow. That's it. I don't ever want to see his eyeballs. I don't ever want to see his face. The more you show of me, the less I want to see. So yeah, cardinal rule number one for horror movies: don't show me the monster. You start off by showing him. I already know I'm going to be in for less of a good time. So I, he moved fine and he acted fine and he was menacing on camera. He had a good camera presence, but the way they did it, man, like him jumping out from behind the couch when she clearly could have seen him and just looking him in the eye, and
Yeah.
or even second act when they're in the hot tub hydrotherapy room and she's like, "Oh, Billy," or whatever the hell his name is, and it's really just Michael with his long sleeve jumpsuit on that you can clearly brush your hand against.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's there are a little too many like liberties taken with how stupid the characters are, and that really takes away from it.
I actually never thought about the point that you brought up about, where he jumps from behind the couch for the first kill. And yeah, he actually did just get shot in the eyes about 20 minutes ago.
Yeah,
And or excuse me, not shot in the eyes, that's later. Coat hanger to the eye. You don't
yeah.
see that. And you see his eyes and he's like, "Oh, stab." And it's just like, I'm okay with the kill, but just the way it happened was very not reminiscent of the first. So that's
Very
their
cartoony.
yeah, it was a little cartoony. So, and as far as the kills go in the film, I'm okay with the extra gore and the anti. I like some of that. I was okay with it, but as far as Michael in the film, generally I actually do like the way that he moves, the way he looks. I like the way the mask, even though it's the same mask from the original, it looks so much different. I like that, and the way it fits on his head and how it's just kind of worn out through a couple years of time just sitting in a box. Um, and I like kind of I like the line between is Michael. This really starts to get into the he's not human, he's kind of superhuman. Because at the end of the first, obviously he gets shot 6 times and falls. Any normal person that would kill under normal circumstances unless of a miracle. In this film, he's shot more times, blown up, and all kinds of stuff happened. And he really starts to get into that mythical land of a person, which I kind of enjoy. But for the most part, I did enjoy Michael in this film, other than a couple things. But I'd never noticed the part with the eyes. That's funny that you mentioned that.
Yeah, right in the opening act, and the story behind that is, Michael Rosenthal shot a movie that was very in line with the first one, but John Carpenter was actually the one that came back and was like, "We need to up the gore factor," and
Yeah.
that's why you noticed in just about, I'm pretty sure every kill scene, there's a jump cut where it was reshot and more gore was added close up, like the scalpel and the hot tub or whatever. A lot of the kills are really close up because they went back in post and reshot them and up the gore factor. So part of that was a reshoot. So
Yes.
um, so I think they just overlooked that in the heat of the moment. But Yeah, it's tricky, and you're right about the mythical aspect of it because once you introduce the family connection, but you have to explain why he's got super strength, why he's almost invulnerable. You got to start explaining that, and that's why they started going towards the supernatural, superhuman side of things. And
Correct.
I don't know, it's so tricky to do this because you can really only do Michael Myers once. Because the more you add on to the backstory, the less magic is there. You know, it's so hard, and I don't blame John Carpenter for not wanting to do it because it's very tricky. But uh, as soon as you start adding the superhuman aspect of Michael Myers to it, I like it. I think it makes him very more threatening
Yeah.
and unstoppable, but also at the same time,
It's a
I'm not watching
50-50
Jason.
kind of
Yeah,
trade
it's
off.
it's double-edged sword for sure.
Okay, so we feel we like some of the stuff about Michael in this film, some things we don't like, but what about Laurie Strode in this film? She basically does not do much of anything until the last act of the film. What she does, in the last act I like, but she's got the absolutely amazing wig on in this film because she had short hair at this point.
Mhm.
I watched this with my girlfriend. She's like, "What's wrong with her hair?" I was like, "It's a wig."
Yeah, I
uh,
didn't know that until this rewatch. I didn't know that.
wow, yeah, it's a wig.
Yeah.
But she doesn't really do much in the film. I think she was kind of blowing up after the original film, so I think it was nice of her to come back.
Mhm.
But her performance is fine in the second half, but other than that, she really doesn't do much than just kind of lay in a hospital bed for most of the film, similar to Halloween Kills.
Yeah, ironically, similar to Halloween Kills. And I don't even think John Carpenter he didn't even try to introduce like a new slew of characters, like the hospital staff or the ambulance staff or the cops. Really, like it was just very like, who's the main character? I couldn't tell. I couldn't tell who the main character was because it wasn't Laurie's story. It wasn't really Michael's story. It wasn't really Loomis's story. It wasn't really the sheriff's story. It kind of just didn't focus on any one person. And I couldn't tell you a single name of a character other than the people I just named.
So Bud and Jimmy are the two paramedics. Now, Jimmy, the guy with like the kind of poofy hair afro, um,
Okay.
he becomes very attached to Lori throughout the film, and he really kind of takes a liking to her. Bud is just kind of there for comedic relief and just
Yeah.
saying, all the jokes and all the stuff like that. I think they were fine. It's just typical 80s stuff. But I will say this, a character that in this film I enjoyed more than any other films he's in is Dr. Loomis.
What was that?
I love Dr. Loomis in this film. To me, this is his best overall performance where he's in the first film, he's just trying to warn people. He hasn't become kind of unhinged. In the second film,
Mhm.
he starts to kind of go there, but it's not over the top like in 4 and 5 where he's acting like a
Mhm.
someone who should be locked up in a sane asylum. He's got that perfect mix. And I really like his performance in this film. He's trying to warn everybody, and when they when they learn that Sheriff Brackett's daughter Annie has died because of Michael, they all blame Dr. Loomis for letting him out. And he tries
Mhm.
to tell them, I didn't let him out. I tried to warn you all, but they don't want to listen. And I just love his performance in this film, especially in the end where the sheriff marshal comes and takes him away, and he's in the back of the car riding with the nurse Chambers, and then he just takes the gun out and points it at the driver's head. He's like, "Turn this car around!" And he shoots the window out. Like, it's just, I love it. I love it.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. He's my favorite character too in all the movies that he's in. Um, I actually like him so much that I named my dog Loomis. That's my dog's name. So,
Sure.
my favorite moment from this movie is the opening scene where they leave the house and Michael's body's gone. He comes out the door, he's looking at the ground, and the neighbor comes out in his bathrobe, and he's like, "What's going on?" And Loomis is like, "Call the police. Tell him he got away. I shot him 6 times." And the neighbor's like, "Is this some kind of trick? I've been trick or treated to death." And Loomis immediately just stops looking at the ground and goes, You don't know what death is, and starts sprinting the other way. So funny and so over the top. I absolutely adore that. I think it's so hysterical. It just makes me love Loomis.
That is a good scene. I do love that scene as well. Yeah, all his scenes in this film, he does a great job. So I'm definitely a big fan of him in this film. So essentially, as the story goes, we won't go scene by scene, but Lori, the paramedics come pick her up from the house because she's in bad shape. They take her to the hospital. She's getting treated. Little do they know that Michael is searching for her. He's kind of walking through the streets of Haddonfield, and it's perfect because he's dressed up like it's Halloween on Halloween, and no one knows he's the actual killer because they think he's just a guy dressed up. So he bumps into this kid who says, has a radio on his shoulder, kind of like a boombox, and hears that Lori's been taken to Haddonfield Memorial Hospital. So he just heads that way. Also, do love the scene in this film where poor Ben Tramer, man, poor guy, he gets blown up into a billion pieces by a car. They're going looking for they're going to look for Michael on the streets, Sheriff Brackett and Dr. Loomis, and they see what is a Michael Myers mask. It looks very similar, but it's not him. The audience knows it's not him. And all of a sudden, they start heading toward him. Loomis pulls out a gun. He's going to shoot him. And all of a sudden, a sheriff comes out of nowhere, hits the kid, pushes him right into a van, and it explodes and it becomes like a piece of burnt meat right in the middle of the road. It's like hilarious. And then the cop just rolls out of the car. He's like, I didn't see him.
Immediately obliterates this character who was mentioned in the first movie but has never shown his face or had any speaking lines. It's like, oh, there goes Ben Tramer. Guess we're never going to meet him. And what's funny about that is, who knows what mask Michael's wearing? Loomis does, and Laurie does, and you could argue Sheriff Brackett does, but I don't think he does because they've never had any face to face with him. So this cop literally just completely obliterated this random trick or treater on the street without having any idea what Michael Myers looks like. I think that's hilarious.
It is funny. And then he's just screaming. It's like, is it him? Is it him? I was like, how's he supposed to know he's burned to a crisp? Like,
of course, it's somebody, that's for sure.
And then not long after that, there's a mob kind of outside the Myers house, and sheriff, the new sheriff that's taken over, I can't think of his name off the top of my head, the one with the blonde hair. Him and Loomis kind of tag team because Brackett, leaves and goes to tells his wife that Annie's, been killed. So he exits. So now he's with the new sheriff, and they're kind of going around. And then all of a sudden they're outside the house, and these two kids come up and they're like, hey, sheriff, have you seen Ben Tramer? He was walking around. He's kind of drunk. He's wearing a mask and a jumpsuit. And they're like, oh shit, that was him. This man is dead. He's like, he hasn't gotten home yet. And he's like, don't worry, it's still early. But little do they know, he is burnt to a crisp in the morgue right now.
Yeah, and that they spent an awful lot of time like getting the dental records and talking about it being Ben Tramer, talking about it not being Michael. And yeah, I know you wanted to be sure it was Michael, but part of me is like, okay, that's kind of just filler. Like, you need to buff up the screenplay and you need some kind of mystery or something. It didn't play off well, in my opinion, but
correct.
It's I'll come back to it when we review Halloween 4, but there's an interesting story aspect to it. But other than Ben Tramer, obviously, I think the elephant in the room that we got to talk about is him being Laurie's sister, or Laurie being his sister. So I know that you said that you're okay with it, but why are you just okay with it? Why are you not passionate about it? Why are you not anti-passionate about it? I mean, it's a huge deal whether they're related or not.
So for me, if I had to pick a side, I'm actually more for them being related. I know that's an unpopular opinion, but I'm actually more for it because, okay, people say it's better when Michael has no motive. Okay, I understand that, but how many films can you have in a row where it's just a guy who has no motive that kills people until it becomes very repetitive, which the same point could be made for him going after his bloodline, but at least there's more, you can add characters, you can take away characters, as we get on throughout the series, there's more of his bloodline he's trying to take out. But people really like the idea of them not being related. But to me, the twist, it's done in a way where in the 80s, obviously we knowing now, we've seen it so many times. But if you were back then and you didn't know the twist, I could see that kind of being a big deal. And so that's why he's after it. I don't really think a lot of people in that era were like, oh, we like Michael because he has no motive. Like, I think in that time period, it's fine. But if I had to pick, I really don't mind them being related. I think it's fine. I'm actually more for it than against it.
Yeah, ironically, that's kind of where I'm at too. I mean, growing up, they've always been related. Like Laurie Strode has always been Michael's sister until 2018. That's the way it's been. That's the story, And after 2018, I'm kind of just jogging my mind, going back and forth. Like, okay, either they're related, and it kind of laser focuses the warpath that is Michael Myers in on one specific person, and the rest of the Haddonfields kind of stay out of the way and you won't be touched, right?
Right.
But then if you take away the family connection, then it becomes obviously like, oh, anybody can get it. Like, watch out, it could be around the corner. But then why is he in Haddonfield? Why? He's got nothing. He's got no connection to Haddonfield. He could have gone anywhere. He's in Illinois. Could have gone to Chicago and gotten way more kills. Like what's the drawing factor there? And there always has to be one. And I think Halloween Ends, which is coming out, is going to explain it finally. But it's tough because I want to say they shouldn't be related, but without them being related, it's like, oh yeah, he's got no motive. He's a mystery. But how far can you go with that?
Exactly. You can only take both storylines so far, but I think you could take the sister storyline, the family storyline further. But you think about it, why would he need to stay in Haddonfield? He can go anywhere. He just happens to keep coming back. No one just goes somewhere just cuz. I mean, it's nice to say that, but that's not realistic. But anyway, get back to Halloween 2. We'll get into that, at another time. So that's our opinions on that. So pretty much at this point, Laurie's in the hospital. She's being taken care of, and then Michael's making his way to the hospital. He gets there. He starts making a couple kills. And then at the same time, we have the scene where Dr. Loomis and the sheriffs show up to the school. And they're like, oh, we think we got him. And this is where they start to kind of unveil the twist, in that later on down the road, we learn more about it, but that Michael is, Loomis pronounced it as Sam Hain, but really it's called Samhain, the real fest of October, about spirits and death and all that stuff. And they're starting to kind of hint at maybe this is what controls Michael. He's controlled by this Samhain thing. And he lays down a knife and he's writing stuff on the board in blood, and that's when they kind of start to hint at that. And then they come with the reveal that they're related, which, like we said, we're fine with. Would you like to see, are you for him being controlled maybe by something, or like you said, are you kind of with the party of not being controlled by anything? He's just a guy.
So the whole Sam Hain Samhain thing, and the spoiler alert for later entries, the whole cult and sacrifice and possession thing that they try to shoehorn in there, I'm not for that. I think it's stupid. I think it's hokey. I think it completely derails anything that we know about Michael Myers, because why is he writing a word in blood? that's not sister, like, I know the TV cut of the original added on a scene where he scraped sister into his cell at Haddonfield, but the first time we ever see Michael literally communicate, either verbally or written, he writes Samhain, like, in blood. How how cliche horror is that, And then to never touch on that again. And I know for a fact John Carpenter has no intention of coming back to it and explaining it because he's done. I feel like it was unnecessary. I mean, the knife in the drawing of the family, yeah, that's okay. That kind of hints at where it's going, you know? First of all, why is that drawing in that classroom after 21 years, right? I don't think any of my kindergarten drawings are in any classroom. And secondly, why? Why did he obviously left the message because he wanted it to be seen, which is not Michael Myers.
True.
But who did he think was going to go to that school, let alone that exact classroom, before he got to his target? I don't know. I just think it was so. I, I feel like they were trying to invent mystery when they didn't need to.
I think that's a good point. I think that, I'm fine with what they did, but to have it happen at the school, it's just a really random place. It's just like,
Yeah.
okay, we need to go here for this to happen. I mean, it would have to happen somewhere, but the school.
Go to the Myers house and do it. Like, there should be drawings in the Myers house. I
Yeah,
would believe that before the school. The school has no significance.
yeah, which, I could see that. So I'm not sure why they went there, but, it's okay. So, Michael's picking people off of the hospital. Obviously, you mentioned the scene. I don't know if you know this fact or not, but when they got in that hot tub, the Thera pool or whatever at the hospital, that water was actually freezing cold. It was not hot.
That was good acting, man.
So, yeah, you can tell that when what's his name got in the pool, it probably went from this to this very quickly.
Right.
So, and I actually kind of like that kill. I think, it's a little over the top. It's kind of funny because, like, how does obviously the pool's like 150, 180 degrees and Michael's just throwing her in there with his hands. He doesn't get burned. He doesn't care. But I like that kill where he pulls her out and her face is all blistered and he just throws her on the ground. I think that's fine.
Yeah.
And he starts picking people off. So we've now kind of gotten to the climax of the film. Lori has kind of woken up. She's seen Michael. She's running away. She's made her way kind of outside the hospital to try to get away. She's gotten in a car. Jimmy, her crush from earlier, who slipped and fell on a massive pile of blood, has a concussion. He happens to get in the same car she's in, tries to, crank the car up and drive away, and he just passes out on the horn. Horn goes off. She's like, oh shit, he's going to know where I'm at. She escapes. At the same time she's escaping, crawling on the ground, we got Dr. Loomis, the marshal, and Nancy Chambers. They walk in. They all kind of meet at the same time. And then we have that recreation of the first film, kind of where Lori's running and Michael's behind her. She gets in, and then Michael busts through the glass like a badass. I love that scene. And Loomis again shoots him numerous times. He falls on the ground. And the marshal is a complete idiot and tries to get near him. And he's like, don't touch him. He's not dead. and he touches him and he gets his throat slit. So
of course
he's dead.
Yeah, I also think it's very funny, the sound design in that scene where he's laying on the ground pretending to be dead and the sheriff's or the police officer's kneeling over him. Don't touch him, he's not dead. And then it cuts back. He's like, the police officer's like, what? And then Michael sits up. And then it cuts back to Loomis. And then it cuts back to Michael. He stabs and then it goes dun dun. Like, okay, do that when he's sitting up. Like, that's the reveal.
Very true. Yeah, I like that kill. That at that point, Mike was like, yeah, like, you're not gonna mess with me. Like, I'm fucking Michael Myers.
Right.
And so at that point, it's Michael and Lori, or excuse me, it's Loomis and Lori versus Michael. They're running away, trying to get away. Michael's chasing them. And at this point, I'm starting to get invested in the film for, usually for the most part, I've liked this film until this past viewing. I was pretty bored until this point. At this point, I'm kind of getting tensed up, and they go in this surgery room and they lock the door and Michael busts in. Loomis tries to shoot him. His gun's out, stabs Loomis. He falls on the ground. It's just Lori and Michael. Lori's in the corner. Loomis handed her a gun earlier. Michael's coming to kill her. And then she's the perfect shot, shoots him twice in the eyes. Now, I don't know about you, but if I got shot in the eyes twice, I'd probably be dead.
Now, not only that, let's say you weren't dead. I'll tell you what you wouldn't be doing. You wouldn't be bleeding from the top of the forehead down over your eyes. You would be bleeding from your eyeballs. Immediately I saw that. I was like, oh, sweet, eyeball callback with the coat hanger. Why is blood dripping from his scalp? That doesn't make any sense. There's no holes in the mask. Where did it go? It had no, if there's no holes in the mask, it had nowhere to go but the eye hole. Why is he bleeding from the top of the forehead? I hated that.
So, I think I like the design of a Michael Myers mask with blood coming. I mean, it's a cool concept if you think about it. It
It's
was,
cool imagery, but nothing more.
yeah, it's executed in a way that really doesn't make sense. So,
Yeah.
it is what it is. So then Michael can't see. So he's got the scalpel. He's trying to, go around the room, trying to swipe anybody that he can. So Loomis and Laurie start turning on these tanks full of gas and things like that, and it's distract him when he doesn't know where to go. So at this point, Loomis still kind of ailing from getting stabbed. He's like, "Hey, Laurie, get out, get out!" And then at this point, Laurie runs out the room, and then Michael kind of starts to come toward him. And then I love this scene. He takes out his lighter. He's like, "It's time, Michael." Lights the lighter, and the whole place explodes. I freaking love that scene.
Yeah,
And
very good. Loomis sacrifices himself. It's over. He went out with a bang,
he went out with a bang, and he blows the whole place up. Laurie's kind of on the outside, just catching the minimum effects of the blow, and then all of a sudden you see Michael kind of coming out stumbling in flames. It's so funny. You watch these older movies with the scenes where people get lit on fire, and they have like the fire suits on, and they're like,
It's
they look
an 80s pyro protection suit. It's so puffy. It looks like the Michelin Man.
exactly. They look like the Michelin Man, and he's coming out walking, and then she thinks he's still alive, and he falls to the ground. He's dead. Movie is basically over, and Laurie gets carted out into another ambulance by another hospital. Morning has come, and she's taken off somewhere else, and that is essentially the end of Halloween 2. Some I didn't touch on, but I want to bring up. The score of this film is basically another redone version of the first one. I will say this: I love the score for this film. I love
Really?
the 80. I love it. I do. It gives me the 80s synth and the
Yeah.
80s vibes, and I think it's great. I don't think it's as good as the original, but I do love the score for this film. I really do.
Yeah, they definitely tacked on some more synths and more 80s sound effects to the score this time around. And the more you add, the less impact it has, especially with the Halloween theme. But yeah, it did a decent job. Obviously wasn't the best, but
Yeah, for sure. So, with that being said, Halloween 2 is over. There's some good, there's some bad. It's not perfect, it's not the worst. Halloween 2, how are you rating it? A to F. What are you giving it?
every horror film, I got to go to my 4 cardinal rules, man. We talked about it last review. I got to talk about it here too.
Don't
Rule number
forget.
one: Rule number one: don't show me the monster. You showed me way too much of Michael in this one. Yeah, he might have been in the same amount of scenes, but he didn't have the creepy shadowed imagery from across the street or in the you know the backyard or whatever, or behind the sheets. Like when you saw him head to toe, right? You got the best look at him yet. So you missed that one. Number two: don't rely only on jump scares. Yeah, there were jump scares, but I wouldn't say this movie was scary. I didn't feel scared by this, even if I was back in that time. I think this one's a little too campy, a little too Halloween movie. Like for me, I don't know. It's hard to explain, but it's easier to distance myself from the characters in this one. So I'm gonna have to say that other than jump scares, you don't have much going for you in ways of scaring. Um, you know, rule number three, be scary at all times. You got to have the atmosphere. The threat has to be a threat at all times, not just when he's on screen. By default, you're Michael Myers, so I have to give you that one. But I didn't really feel it this time around like I felt it the last time. And the fourth, the golden rule is push the boundaries, do something different. I'll give you a half a point on that one because you definitely pushed the kills from where the franchise has been, but a hot tub boiling, drowning, and a syringe in the temple. Like, yeah, that's like something you'd see in Saw in 2006, but not really in 1981. So we have Jason, we have Texas Chainsaw. So I'll give you a little bit there. With that being said, it's not an A and it's not a B. It's not an F or a D either because there are definitely worse Halloween sequels. I gotta give it a C, man. It's average. I own it because it's number 2 and because it's part of the franchise, but I'm not gonna rewatch it. I'm good with number 1.
So for me, prior to this review, I would have given this film probably a B because I have always really, really enjoyed this film. I'm gonna watch it obviously again, as all with all the other Halloween films. I will watch it again, but this go around, I was a little bit more. I was way more bored than normal. I saw some things that kind of took my attention that typically haven't before. So I'm kind of with you on this, Cam. I'm gonna give this film a C as well. It's not the best. It's not the worst. In terms of horror sequels, they do not have a good reputation, but this film is, for a horror sequel, I think it's just fine. It's not great. It's not bad. It's right in the middle. Mm-hmm. So I don't have a problem with it. If the series would have, let's say hypothetically, the series ended here and they didn't bring it back for like 20, 30 years, I think this would be a great ending point for the series, to stop. You've got 2 films, same night, 2 different types of stories. It would have been a great way to end it.
Yeah, it kind of suffered from what it suffered from in 2017 and 2019. Like part 1 was so banging and so nostalgic right out the gate that there's no way the 2 is ever going to top it. And it kind of floundered out at the end. It's like, all right, well, the series is done. Don't rip it off anymore.
It too was such a disappointment.
It too sucked, but it 1 was phenomenal.
I liked the first one.
Yeah,
but so that's our review for Halloween 2. Thank you for tuning in with us. Next one, we're doing Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. Now, let me preface: we all know this film does not have Michael Myers in it.
Or you might not know that. You might not even know that John Carpenter went to his anthology idea, and Halloween 3 has nothing to do with Michael Myers or Haddonfield or anything like that.
Some people might not know that, but I've seen this film a couple times. I will save my opinion for it to the review. Jeff, on the other hand, this will be his first time ever watching Halloween 3.
I have never seen Halloween 3, never in my life. When I was a kid and I was watching Michael Myers, the original one, and I was like 6 or 7. I was like, oh, we gotta watch 2 and 3. And I was like, 2 sucked, and 3 doesn't even have Michael Myers in it. I was like, as a 6-year-old, I was like, what? So I just avoided it like the plague. Not even actively, just like, no Michael, no laundry. I don't want it, So yeah. I'm finally gonna watch it for the first time ever. Never seen it before. I gotta watch it right after we hang up here. And you'll hear my first right off the bat reactions, because I don't think you get a lot of first-time viewing reactions nowadays with the Halloween franchise, but it'll be my first time.
That's true. So I'm very excited to see your reaction. My experience, I won't say what I think yet, but my experience, I always was like you. I avoided it because there's no Michael Myers. We all come from Michael Myers. That's every film. However, I think, as I started to grow my taste in horror films and wanted to watch different ones, I said, you know what, I'm going to give this film a chance. I'm going to go with an open mind. I know there's no Michael, and I definitely had an experience with this film that I will share. So we will get into that with Halloween 3 on our next review. Thank you guys for tuning in. You can follow us on Instagram at Every Horror Film. Happy October. Horror is forever. We will see you next time.
The mummy has now been located.
The living mummy. The living mummy.
Bullets won't stop.
Some creature out of time.
It was horrible. It was horrible.
He's completely out of control.
I saw those bodies.
Is he a man or a monster?
You actually knew a werewolf in a peaceful town where nothing ever happened.
It was horrible. It was horrible.
In the mystical regions of Transylvania.